This is Transqat, a safe space to stand. Transgender issues, queer people, respectful conversations. I'm host Clare McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat. This episode of Transqat is available in video format on our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/@transcat9607 or just search for Transqat channel. That's TRANSQAT. As I recall, it was, in order, the hair, the smile, the chair. Farrah Garland and I were both in attendance at the inaugural LGBTQ+ Congress, put on by Equality Connecticut, last November in New Haven. We were in different breakout sessions, so we didn't get a chance to speak directly, but I noticed them. I noticed the blaze of green in their hair. I noticed their wide, disarming smile while they conferenced with a group of other attendees. And I noticed the wheelchair. A little investigation, a few questions to those in the know, and I learned that this was the Farrah Garland. The "the" is in parentheses, by the way. Farrah the activist and educator. Farrah the artist and writer. Farrah the creator of good, necessary trouble. And I knew I had an episode. In previous episodes of Transqat, we have discussed disability rights and the parallels and overlaps with LGBTQ+ rights. You can check out episode 15 with Arts Administrator John Kalaki, episode 22 with Matthew Rodriguez, and most recently my conversation with poet Joy Layden. I think that was episode 81. Once we were connected on social media, I noticed that Farrah was occasionally sharing reels of brief piano improvisations. These were beautiful, and I asked if they could end our Zoom-recorded conversation with one. The rainbow paint swath of Farrah's background rendered their piano invisible. They seemed to be playing a ghost piano. It was a little unnerving, and it looked like this. Anyway, that's why, for those of you watching the video version of this, we cut to a pre-recorded insert. Hope you enjoy this conversation. So we should start, even before introductions, we should start with confessions. When you and I set this up, we exchanged book recommendations.
We did.
And I obtained the recommended book from the public library. Let's give public libraries a shout out.
Heck yes, public libraries.
And I will admit to you right up front that I got about 100 pages in.
That is fair.
Which is not as far as I would like, but it was great reading. So here's the question. Were you able to obtain a copy of Claire's Brilliant Imperfection?
I have ordered a copy from Thrift Books.
Ooh.
Big shout out to Thrift Books. And it has not yet arrived, but it is on its way. So I'm very much looking forward to diving in on it.
I took notes on where, as far as I got with care work, and as we go through, I do want to bring some of it up because it's fascinating. Really expanded my idea of not just what disability justice is, but the nature of disability in general. I think I was looking at a much more narrow focus than I probably should have been.
I think most people probably do, and
yeah,
that's why that book is so beautiful.
And I loved the way the author keeps referring to, like, not somebody who is not disabled yet, or not disabled as of the current writing. And as someone who is getting older, I liked that very much. That right now.
Yeah, if we are lucky, all of us will live long enough to experience disability.
Let's backtrack just a little bit. Introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. Hi, my name is Farrah Garland. They, them pronouns. I am a non-binary, trans, queer human being of the disabled persuasion, making my way through the world down here in Stonington, Connecticut.
Ooh.
I do disability and queer rights work and I make art and I do organizing and spin my limited spoons just trying to make the world a better, kinder, and more equitable place.
Actually, let me start there because that was a term that I was not aware of before reading Care Work, and I love it. Tell me about spoons.
Oh, spoon theory. It's spoon theory is wonderful. It's an easy metaphor for explaining energy or resources for chronically ill folk. So it started with a friend or a woman who was trying to explain her energy usage to an abled friend. She was saying like, oh, I get I'm chronically ill and fatigued, I get tired. And her friend's like, well, I get tired. We all get tired. And she's like, it's not the same. So she went around the restaurant they were at and she gathered up all the spoons off all the, hi, Kitty.
That's new.
Hi, Newt. She gathered up all the spoons off the tables around her and she brought it over. She laid them out and had like maybe 10 spoons. She said, okay, non-disabled person. You get up in the morning. You get out of bed, take a shower, shave if you need to do that, do your hair, get dressed, make breakfast, get out the door for work. You've used a spoon. You go and you drive to work or take transit, work the first half of your day, have lunch, you've used a spoon. You finish up your work day, go to the grocery store, you've used a spoon, hit the gym, come home and make dinner, and that's a spoon. Feed the kids, put them to bed, get them bathed. You got a spoon, and then you got like 4 or 5 spoons left for the end of the day to whatever, right? When you are disabled, chronically ill, chronically fatigued, you get out of bed and that's a spoon. You take a shower and that is a spoon. You make yourself breakfast and that is a spoon. And it's just a different way of looking at energy usage and modulation, and it's called spoon theory. And so it's also become shorthand for folks to just talk about the energy you have and yeah.
When you work in activism or anything of the sort, in caregiving, you have to be alert to that, that it is something that makes demands on you and will always make demands on you until you decide, I need some healthy boundaries here. I need time to recharge. I need to take care of myself first, the old oxygen mask on the plane metaphor. And that image of spoons just really spoke to me, that it's about self-care, but it's also about caring for others.
That's right. As my one of my besties likes to say, you can't pour from an empty cup.
All the metaphors.
All the metaphors. Yeah.
So tell me about what you do in terms of disability justice. What
So as far as disability justice and that work goes, I mean, on the small and local everyday scale, I mean, I I like to say that I yell at stairs, which is so very true. But I like to take the opportunities, the micro opportunities to educate and talk about inaccessibility or little bits of ableism or what I see in the world around me, whether it's, in social media, whether it's interacting with people one-on-one, whether it's writing an article. But I also sit on our state, Connecticut's Independent Living Council. Yes, SILC, which is the state board organization that oversees the resources for all of the independent living centers throughout Connecticut,
Hmm.
which are the centers that make sure that disabled folk have all the resources and whatnot that they need to be able to live independently, full lives. So I've been on that for a little over a year now. It's been really wonderful. We've done a lot of great work. I also serve on a subcommittee through that, which has spurred off into an entirely different organization called the Connecticut Wheelchair Reform Coalition, which I chair. And through that, we have worked to get a bill put together, which got passed into law last year, which is the first of its kind in our country, that mandates that wheelchairs actually be repaired by the industry in a timely manner. So,
Imagine that.
yeah, what a concept. Like,
Yeah.
fix our stuff in a timely manner instead of
What is
30 days to a couple years.
yeah, well, I was going to say prior to legislation like that, if something happens to your chair, it's a month or more before.
The national average is 27 to 28 days. I have a friend and colleague who waited about 3 years, I think, for foot plates, which, yeah, are just the things that your feet go on. It's nothing fancy. I personally waited about a month and a half for a cushion. So, then yeah, the national average is about 28 days. It's right around there. It's bananas. And with this piece of legislation that we passed, they now have 10 days, which is still too long,
Yeah.
but it's a huge improvement. And there's, of course, a caveat for like things that are outside of the industry control, like while parts are being shipped and when they're waiting for prior auth from the doctors and stuff like that. But
Is there any sort of rental is the adjective that I'm using in my head, but so if your chair goes in for repair, are you sent a replacement for that month, 2 months, 3 years?
so, like a loaner,
Yeah, that's the word.
yeah, no asterisk. Some companies will try to have something like that in place, but it really just depends on the complexity of the chair that you're using. For some folks like myself, I'm ambulatory, which means I can walk with, aid from like my cane or my crutches. I have a custom chair, but if I'm using a different chair, it's over time it would be harmful to me, but short term it would be okay. Not great, uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
I'll live. For people with more complex chairs, the big power chairs, stuff with, supports, or the little puff and sips, puff and goes, that you use your
Hmm.
mouth to control. Those are a lot more complex and really hard to provide, loaners or rentals or replacements for. So we currently have a council, an advisory council in place to monitor the the bill and make sure it's being enforced. And we have people from there's only two companies that actually make up 90% of the wheelchair supply industry in the state.
Wow.
And they sit on this council with us every month. And we've had conversations about providing, loaners and whatnot, but it's very difficult to do that in a comprehensive and also safe way for folks. So just getting stuff done in a timely way is better.
Well, one of the main themes, at least as far as I had gotten in care work, is the need for collective work rather than individual work. Because what you're describing sounds to me incredibly frustrating and isolating if my and we're using wheelchairs as an example, but there are all sorts of accommodations that this could apply to, where you're in that position where I'm going to be a month without my wheelchair. If it's just you, you're left sitting there in your frustration. But collectively, maybe the community can work together to put together something temporary for you, some sort of a loaner situation, or someone to help you in and out of cars to get to where you need to go. Just and that seemed to me very much like queer activism in that ultimately it comes down to community. It comes down to us being there for each other.
That's right. And, we may not be able to piece together an appropriate chair to, take care of someone with some complex technology. But what we can do is, be there for each other to make sure you're not sitting home by yourself all day. Make sure that you have food and groceries. Make sure that, someone's checking in on you and, making sure you're getting to your appointments all right. Or, if you're nonverbal, making sure someone's calling your doctors and communicating clearly. And again, we just the entire process of getting this bill passed was a beautiful example of this because this happened because a bunch of wheelchair users said this is this is not good enough,
Yeah.
and we collectively deserve better. And we came together and worked on this and pushed back against some legislators, and some legislators stood with us, and we made it happen. And it was an act of community and, just reaching out to our allies and within the disabled community itself. It's definitely not a thing done in isolation. And yeah, yeah, no, community's everything.
Hi, folks. It's Clare interrupting. I'll keep this brief. Please consider donating to support the show. If you go to transqat.com, that's TRANSQAT.com, hit the support button and then donate. You can also visit the Transqat store and support us that way. And if you're a business or an organization, please consider sponsoring the show. We have a few slots left for season 3, but we will also be looking for sponsors for season 4. Thank you for your support. Well, you and I, just to pull an example, and I don't want to cast shade on anybody here, but you and I almost met at an event in New Haven, and you were in your chair that day. How was that event in terms of accessibility? Because it really, we're talking about access to places, to, the things you need. So just to pick that one piece out of your week, month, year, how was it getting into and around at that event?
Once I was in the building, it was pretty decent. Better than a lot of places I've been. There were elevators to every floor. All the rooms were big enough for me to actually get into. There was even the auditorium, the main space that we were in. There was designated seating for the chairs, and they had those little like tray tables that came down, and they had those designated for the wheelchair seating as well.
So you
Which,
could be working on a laptop or, taking
yeah,
notes, what have you.
I
Yeah.
haven't seen those before for the spaces left open for chairs. Usually we're just sort of out of luck. But that was really nice. So I feel like the space itself was pretty nice. As always with these New England cities, the biggest issue is always having to park across town and then just wheel across the city in the cold usually, and just weird sidewalks and trying to find the entrance. And but that's just part of it. I was grateful that I found a group of very visibly queer folk, and I was just like, are we going the same place? Can I follow you?
Yeah. Yeah, but there again, the ability to, the need to work together to solve problems.
Yep,
What do
absolutely.
you see in terms of an overlap of the queer community and the disability community? Is that, correct me if I'm using the wrong terms, is
No, you're
disability?
spot on. Oh no, the intersection there is actually huge. The number of disabled folk that also identify as queer in some manner or another is very large, and the number of queer folk that are also disabled is very large, though you wouldn't necessarily know it from a lot of queer events and spaces because they are often inaccessible. But but yeah, no, the overlap there is statistically quite large, which I think is really beautiful. I think a lot of that, just from my own musings, has to do with, when you are part of one demographic where you get to kind of self-identify, you get comfortable with self-identifying and realizing that a label like disabled or queer is not a bad thing, and in fact, a really beautiful thing, and gives you community and a lot of other really wonderful things. And then when the next, opportunity for a label or a community or whatnot comes along, it just becomes so much easier to be like, oh yeah, this is not an issue for me.
Well, one of the words that the author coined that I also really took to heart is, as one word, broken beautiful.
Mhm.
And I have long considered myself broken. I am trans. I physically, I don't, there's really not much except for the fact that I'm aging that you could consider in there, but I have a long history with anxiety and depression,
Mm.
and that is part of the disability community that I mean, generally when people who are ableist think about disability, they think about mobility, right? They think about wheelchairs and canes, but not hearing, not sight, not mental, not developmental, not a whole host of things. And I, reading that book, I felt a little guilty that I had never considered all of that. But I have long used that word broken to describe myself. And the thought that there might be beauty in that made me stop and think.
There is a Japanese term called wabi-sabi, WABI hyphen SABI. And I can't tell you how exactly it translates because I do not actually speak Japanese, but the basic vibe is beauty in brokenness or beauty in that which is falling apart and broken. And it is an aesthetic style of, if you find like broken, kind of like broken pottery or
Hmm.
photos of, you'll see photos of like, old falling down barns or things like that. The wabi-sabi, the beauty in that which is broken. And it is a very old value and something revered in Japanese art. And it is something that like I discovered when I was a teenager, that concept, and really clung to, partly because aesthetically I really like it, and also because I think it really resonated with someone who also has felt very broken a lot of their life.
Mhm.
And yeah, yeah, it's a good vibe,
Sweetie, you're not going to walk on the keyboard, are you? Come on over. This is the Lady Bethesda.
Hi, Bethesda.
You all right? Do you want to come sit? I'm having it. No, you just want to pass through. Okay.
Mhm.
One of the things that I'll just lean this way for a while. One of the things that it seems to me that the two communities, the queer community and the disability community, have in common is a degree of closeting. Obviously, closeting comes out of the history of the queer community, but I would imagine that there's a fair amount of in the workplace, in the housing market, of sort of lack of self-disclosure for fear of discrimination. And that struck me as something that was sort of an unexpected parallel.
Yeah, I mean, the fear of discrimination from others and also the internalized ableism
Mm.
and internalized, homophobia, transphobia that we all just growing up in the society that we're in, I think that we all have to some extent and have to learn to work through and shed. And for some of us, that's way easier than for others, depending on how you're brought up and where you're brought up and so on and so forth.
Mm.
But all of us have some internalized ableism because we all are brought up with the idea that the goal, the ideal, the perfect body is fit and healthy and you can run fast and jump and swim and just the perfect body. And just kind of figuring out that like, well, why? And how how is a disabled body like a broken body? Is that being disabled
How
wrong?
did we arrive at that standard of this is what perfection is?
Hmm.
Did we arrive at it at something other than advertising, for example?
That's right. It's very capitalist, which is something my therapist really helped me work through. The idea that it's tied to your value is tied to what you can produce, what you can do. And if you are disabled, whether it's physically or psychologically or what have you, well, you probably can't go and do as much and make as much and create and, you know, make as much money in the workforce. And therefore, what
Well,
good are you really?
because you use your spoons more readily in the course of a day.
That's right. And also, maybe you can't get into all the same office spaces and, can't do all the same jobs. But another parallel, I just had this conversation, was it yesterday? It was yesterday, talking about masking. I was
Mm.
speaking with someone about being trans and person feeling a bit uncomfortable with when do you start feeling less uncomfortable about presenting in public, and people staring and whatnot. And there is that whole aspect of being a trans person or a gender nonconforming person and the way you dress the way you want to dress. But also when you have a physical disability and you use the mobility aids you need to use, and people will stare and sometimes make rude comments. And the same as when you present the way that, resonates with you. And sometimes people stare and make rude comments. And at the end of the day, like, those aren't your people. Who cares? I mean, I was born with my disability, but it's progressive. So it didn't affect me negatively too badly for a long time. But by the time I was in my late teens, I was needing to use a cane. I put off using one far too long because I was afraid. And because when I did start using a mobility aid, people stared because I've always looked young for my age. And I was also looking very young to be using a cane. People stared and people made comments. And so I stopped using it and put it off. And same with using my walker and then using my crutches and then using a wheelchair. And it did irreparable damage to my body. I am worse off now physically because I let other people's opinions of me, control how I lived my life. And the same can be said for like, choosing to live as who I am. Is I wouldn't say it was irreparable damage, but I definitely let how people thought about me and what they might say or think or feel control like who I am and how I'm going to live. And at the end of the day, none of those people are my people. So why does it matter?
Yeah.
But definite overlap.
What's worse, the notion the people who make those rude and insensitive or deliberately hurtful comments, or the ones with just misplaced ugh, pity, the ones who come up and offer to pray with you for you, who who want to turn you into some sort of poster child for resistance or a movie of the week heroine.
Yeah.
Which one hurts more when you're on the receiving end of that?
Oh, it's really hard to say. I mean, I've been doing both of these things for so long now. I'm not sure that either hurt too much. I think to some extent it's easier to handle the people who are just rude because, you can just be like, all right, thanks. You can also just sort of, I mean, as unfortunate as it sounds, you can kind of just write them off and be
Yeah.
like, wow, they're just dicks. Like they are just unkind people, and there's probably not much that I can say that will help them. But the people who want to like pray for you or fix you or whatever, it's just like I have spent years of my life trying to talk to people and help them understand, and it always ends in the destruction of a relationship because they mean well and don't understand why their good intentions are not being received well. So I don't know that it necessarily hurts more because, again, it's just been through it so many times at this point. But I think it is the more frustrating one just because it's harder to write off, but I know that no matter how hard I try to like connect with the person, how do you connect with someone who just wants to fix who you are?
That inspires me, if you'll permit me, to read a quote from Eli Clare's book,
Please.
Brilliant Imperfection. Within white Western medicine, diagnosis projects the concept and the practice of disorder onto us. Flip through the two source books for diagnostic labels and codes, and that word leaps out repeatedly to describe, define, and categorize body minds. Some of us do live with dis-order, digestive tracts, immune systems, neurons, nerve receptors, muscles, and joints that have fallen out of order, most typically associated with humans. Of course, this descriptive notion of disorder relies on a clear, singular definition of order. But disorder means not just disordered, but also wrong, broken, in need of repair.
Mhm.
Disorder is used to constrict and confine, to devalue and pathologize. And that we're seeing that very much with the current spate of anti-trans legislation and executive orders, in that this is not something we should be tolerating, this transness. It's something that, for some people, we should just dissuade them from it. And from those like McCarthy, in whom it is deeply embedded, we should find a way to fix them.
Yeah.
And that applied to the disability community just seems like a profound injustice to me, that yes, there are things that need to be cured. If you're in chronic pain, yes, please, let's do something about that. But not every difference from that norm, that we don't even know how that became the norm, not every difference there needs to be fixed.
Yeah. And additionally, the idea that like when it comes to my health,
Hmm.
I will talk to my healthcare providers about that. Probably not some random person in line at the bank, you know?
Seems reasonable.
I mean, I know it's a really wild concept, but like, the random guy behind me at the post office is, medical expertise off the cuff, knowing nothing about me really doesn't mean that much to me, as much as it means I'm glancing at you and you look wrong to me. You look wrong. And it's just like, but why? What about me looks wrong to you? Because you're giving me medical advice. Can I pray for you? Person in a wheelchair, I don't know what's wrong with you, but my sister's boyfriend's cousins, whatever, 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 and they tried this supplement, or have you ever tried yoga, or whatever it may be? And it's just like, I have doctors. I would love to not be in pain. Don't get me wrong. Like, I live with it. It's not great. But again, I have healthcare providers, and I don't need random people in the world looking at me as someone who needs to be fixed. Because my disability is part of who I am. It has made me who I am. And even though being in pain is not great, I do love who I am. And as far as like being queer, being trans, hard same. And I don't need to see a healthcare provider about that, and neither does anyone else, unless they would like, any sort of affirming things. But, that is innate to who we are, and no one's business.
Hey Hey folks, I'm interrupting again. We are fast approaching the end of season 3, and I'm really proud of the conversations that Transqat has been able to bring you. We've supported the LGBTQ plus community with episodes spotlighting PFLAG, the Out Accountability Project, Dignity USA, SojiCon, Prism Counseling, Q+, and the beloved Free Mom Hugs. You've heard in-depth explorations of new creative works from Abby Maxwell, Joy Layden, Logan Ward, Angela Wick, and of course, my contractually obligated annual conversation with author Elliot Schrafer. Plus, we've offered the personal stories of folks like wrestler Mac Beggs, Congressman Barney Frank. I still can't believe that happened. And the folks on our Valentine's Day special. If you're a regular listener, take a moment and share your favorite episode on social media. At transcat.com, I've uploaded a template for a social media post. Fill in the blanks with your personal selection and add it to Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, or TikTok. Zhuzh it up, and then be sure to tag us at Transqat. That's TRANSQAT. Thanks. You think your gender identity is blah, blah, blah. We can help you pray that away. We can show you the discipline that you need. And when they're saying that about queer people, I think there's probably a group of somewhat reasonably minded people who say, yeah, a little bit of self-discipline and you won't need to do that anymore. Whereas saying that to someone who's visually impaired or to someone who is a paraplegic and say, well, a little more discipline and you could get over that blindness thing, just put your mind to it. Let God help you. And it shows, to me anyway, the flaw in the reasoning.
It does. And you're spot on when we say that with, queer and trans folk, just like we can fix you, we call that, conversion therapy. And when we say that with disabled folk, we call that eugenics. Neither one is good. Like
let's just commit to that right now. Eugenics, not good. Yeah.
Yeah. Both are bad. I know this is a very controversial statement. I'm going to ruin all of my future political careers by going to the record with this
I'm
one.
canceling this interview right now. But here's a subtle piece of that needs to be said out loud, I think, which is that there is a multi-billion-dollar industry out there that makes money off that belief that we can provide either a service or a pharmaceutical that can cure you or bring you closer to cure. And as I say, some things, absolutely. Thank you. I am very happy that I'm on Lexapro. It has helped me be a lot more balanced, and I'm grateful for that. But that notion that the answer to everything is a pill or an invasive operation is not so.
I'm right there with you. There are many medications and procedures that I am on or have had or will need to have that I'm extremely grateful for because they keep me alive or keep me feeling good while I'm alive, and grateful for that. And at the same time, there are also so many things that we just don't need to be trying to fix or medicate or carve away from our humanity. The bodily autonomy thing I think is important. I try to be careful because if someone wants to make a change to their form, their body, to adjust something about who they are, to make them feel better about a disability or something else, like, hey, go for it. However, when you have the backing of all the insurance companies and all the pharmaceutical companies and all the everything else telling you, like, you won't be right until you do this. You're always going to be a little bit broken until you do this. It gets real, ah,
There
yeah.
is when we were talking about brokenness, there's a line in a Leonard Cohen song, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
I love that.
But that notion that, bringing back to the wabi sabi, that there is an intrinsic beauty in things that are not the default setting according to society. That, that a rundown building can be beautiful. You know, a body like this one could be beautiful under the right circumstances.
Mm. I mean, if we have very narrow definitions of what is right, of what is beautiful, of what is perfect, then we end up with, and I am not passing any shade or shame on anybody, but we end up with just like a world of like Kardashians, you know? And
Yeah.
yeah, or pick your model here, right? But like if you have such a very narrow standard of like, well, this is perfection. This is what everybody needs to aspire to be like. You're not right until your body works like this and it looks like this and you got to fight aging and you've got to just so on and so on and just like where does it end? And I mean this could go on for days, but to scroll it back, I mean just being able to exist as you are and as you feel most authentic, whether that, you know, involves medical intervention or not, as a queer person or as a disabled person, and to just be able to exist in the world, hope without the like constant pressure and nagging of a billion, many billion dollar industry, and then also of people on the street.
Yeah.
Like, that's the goal, right? To have the options, but not the pressure, not the judgment. That would be my dream.
And one of the pushbacks that we're seeing against DEI and representation is that it's somehow,
Hi, baby.
oh, here. Yeah, I know. Here, you want to say hello?
Hello. You're
This is
so
this is
beautiful.
Bethesda. Yeah, I know you're unhappy. I'm sorry. But in terms of representation, that it's dismissed as being political correctness. But the reality is, if you don't see representations that are at least somewhat similar to you, whether we're talking about disability or queerness, on the screen, small screen, the big screen, in the news, in just daily life, where you can go to high school and have a teacher who's queer without fear of repercussions, where you can have where you can see that this school is committed to access, not just theoretically, but here's a mobility impaired teacher and they're able to get around this building just fine and everybody respects them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you don't see that, then it's so much easier to buy into the notion that, you're right. I am other. I am not good enough. And maybe I better spend my money on whatever it is they're selling me to make me better.
That's right. Or just give up, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, if we look back in time, Judy Heumann, who is considered the mother of the ADA, the
Mm.
Americans with Disabilities Act, she was a wheelchair user, rest in peace. She went to get her teaching license and went through all the training, all the education. She managed to get it, which is only because she had all the support in the world from like her family and everything. And the Board of Education denied it to her because they were like, well, how on earth would someone like you teach? And she fought it. and she never stopped fighting for disability rights. And did the 504 and was involved in the 504 sit-in, giving us, disability rights and, so much more for that piece of legislation, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and so on and so forth. But she is a little girl, was a little girl way back in the day who could not go to her friends' houses, could not get off of sidewalks because there were no curb cuts, had to go to had to have special things installed to be able to go to school, had to go to special schools segregated from her friends, and never had teachers who looked like her, and literally had to sue everybody and change the entire world along with so many other people. She did not do this alone, but, because community, thanks to her and the people like her, we now have examples of physically disabled educators and people using wheelchairs in public spaces. You can get into public spaces in a wheelchair now, thanks to her.
I can't think of a single classroom that I taught in over the years where I could have gotten in if I were in a mobility device. I certainly have never been in a classroom where the aisles between the desks were wide enough for me to be, moving amongst my class. Under the best case scenario would be that I could somehow get into the building, get into the classroom, and get to the teacher's desk. None of which I've saw were ever, accommodated for a wheelchair.
Right. But yeah.
So that, yeah, the question of, well, if I'm capable of doing this job, but I don't have the access, just to pivot a little bit because we are running short on time here. This week, there was a proposed $880 million cut to Medicaid. What would that do to disabled folks across the country who are relying on Medicaid?
I mean, that's a number that and I think most people can't really conceptualize. And I think that's kind of part of the point, is that it's so big that people can't really wrap their heads around it. But any sort of cut to Medicaid, especially a huge one, would be just devastating. I mean, folks rely on Medicaid for staying alive. This is our basic income, and no one gets rich off of Medicaid, despite what some conspiracy theorists might tell you. But it's our health care. It's the insurance that older folks and disabled folks rely on to stay alive. Additionally, and this is something that I think a lot of people are unaware of, this also funds nursing facilities, like nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities. So if we make these cuts, not only are you, screwing over older folks and disabled folks, which, hey, maybe you're a right winger and you're like, forget those people. Okay. I hope that you are ready to start making space in your guest room for your parents that you socked away somewhere because their facilities are going to be defunded. Because that's also what that means. And
along with any chance of home care attendance.
Oh, yeah. Not that they have proper funding anyway, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's already wildly underfunded. Yeah, no, home care, forget it. Yeah, nursing homes and nursing facilities, absolutely not. And then, yeah, folks that rely on, Medicaid for their insurance, for, income, for just a whole host of things. It would be just utterly devastating, and people would be left high and dry and devastated. I struggle to put it into words. I spoke to my doctor about this a few weeks ago, and he tried to reassure me, and he was like, it's a valid concern because the administration is bananas. But also
that's the technical term, Farrah.
It is my term. He used a much less professional term.
Wow. Okay. Then we'll go with bananas. That's fine.
I love my doctor. But he's like, it's the bananas, but also probably nothing to worry about because do you know how many like thousands of millions of people are on Medicare and Medicaid. Like it would absolutely just upend the entire country. Like you have no idea. No one has any idea. Like the country as we know it would just cease to exist if this happened. So that's that's I have a hard time really conceptualizing it, and that's what my Yale healthcare provider has to say about it. So
But this, I mean, this isn't surprising, obviously.
no.
In his first administration, this president tried to do away with the ADA,
Hmm.
was sort of very vocal about getting rid of the Affordable Care Act.
Hmm.
But he also wanted to get rid of the ADA, wanted to make these sorts of deep cuts in Medicaid.
Yep.
So this does not come as a surprise.
It is. And I mean, when folks have been asking whether it's about disability rights or queer rights, I mean, the answer has been the same, which is yes, we're horrified and we can't stop working now, but also none of this is shocking. None of this is coming as a surprise. We saw this in the first administration, and he told us he told us what his plans were all along. Like
And
now pushing back.
and that's the thing that steals my spoons is that he was very upfront about all of this in the campaign,
Hmm.
and this is what half the country wanted. They said, "Yep, let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's
Or at the
put,
bare minimum, it's not a deal breaker.
yeah, right. It's if it can bring grocery prices down, then the disabled people and the queer people and the immigrants, they can just they'll find another way to get by."
That's right. That's right. Because,
Uh,
the cost of eggs.
there you go. Which has dropped uh, not at all. So there's at least there's that.
That's right. That's right. Waffle House is charging extra for eggs now. So,
When Waffle House abandons us, I'm pretty sure that's in the Book of Revelations. When Waffle House abandons us, it's over.
when Waffle House abandoned us, and was it Iowa, Idaho, somewhere is defunding Dolly Parton? I mean, it's over.
Farrah, this has been wonderful. Thank you
Thank you,
so
Claire.
much. We had talked, ow, apparently we do need to trim the claws, don't we, son? We had talked about the possibility of you noodling us out of the show. Is that a possibility? Are you
I think I can make that happen.
A quick look at the calendar. Kim and Claire's Sex Trivia rolls into Chester, Connecticut at Sam Avery's studio on May 23rd. I'll be hosting Queer History Trivia at the Milford Public Library on May 29th. You can register at milford-pl.libcal.com. The last 5 episodes of this season, that would be 89 through 93, are a collaboration with Middletown Pride. They'll appear in full here at Transqat, wherever you normally listen. They'll also be airing on WESU 88.1 Middletown, and will be hosted on the Middletown Pride website. Episode 89 is a conversation with Brianna Bloom-Scavera and Stephen Kovac. She's the organizer of Middletown Pride. He's the chair of Middletown's LGBTQIA+ Commission. Episode 90 is with this year's Grand Marshals, Chris Fort and Ace Ricker. Episode 91 is a panel of librarians, including from Middletown's own Russell Library. We'll be talking censorship efforts, legislation, and what happens when you take a chainsaw to the IMLS. Chainsaw! Episode 92 is a look at the work of Pride Centers around the state. Our guests will be New Haven Pride Center's Laura Bocadero and Triangle's Amanda Redfern. The final episode of the season will be a look at the evolving language of Soji and what that means in real life. And as to Pride...
Is this the end?
Of course not. It's only the beginning.
Look for the Transqat tent at Middletown Pride on June 7, North Haven on the 14th, North Adams, Massachusetts on the 20th, and Holyoke, Mass on the 21st. This has been Transqat. I'm Clare McCarthy. Thank you for listening, and let's talk soon.
This is Sadie McCarthy. I'm Claire's niece.
And you've just been listening to Transqat. It is made by one of my favorite people in the world, Clare McCarthy.
Transqat is a production of Transqat Enterprises, LLC.
Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.
Join us on the web at transqat.com.
That's TRANSQAT.com.
QAT.com.
QAT.com.
There you'll find links to Transqat, the blog,
writing projects,
speaking engagements,
and our PayPal donations page.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monkeys.
Your monies.
Your monies.
Not monkeys.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monies. Any monkeys will be gratefully received as well.
Follow Transqat on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
On TikTok, we are at The Real Transqat.
Want to tell your story on air?
or ask Claire a question.
What is the deal?
She has all the answers.
Or suggest a guest or topic for an upcoming episode.
Use the contact page at the website
or email her directly at crmtranscat@gmail.com.
crmtranscat@gmail.com.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.